going to turn it over to our speakers. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to the Vermont Library Association, to Kevin and to Mike for your invitation to give us a chance to talk about SimplyE and the open ebook ecosystem. We have a presentation that we'll go through, and then we'd be happy to answer questions at the end and take this wherever you'd like to take it. So with that, let me bring up my presentation. Let's see. Maybe I should go full screen here. Okay, so can you all see my first slide? Very good. Okay, so we're going to talk about the open reading ecosystem and SimplyE. As mentioned, I'm Robert Cartolano. I'm from Columbia University. I'm the Associate Vice President for Technology and Preservation. And James English will present himself as well, but he's at LYRASIS. And James and I have been working on this project in various ways, shapes, and forms now exceeding 4 years, I think. So we're on a quest, a mission to transform the reading experience, and it starts with the work that's happened in public libraries, particularly New York Public Library, and in many public libraries, and extends now to the academic libraries. So let's talk about our agenda today. We'll talk about the efforts around SimplyE. Why do we have SimplyE, and why are we talking about open ebooks? Talk about SimplyE for Columbia. James will segue to talk about the technology and what we're doing around technology and what comes next, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So there are many challenges related to ebooks. I am sure that you could probably tell me stories about your challenges with ebooks, but in the academic setting in particular, what we find is that the proliferation of ebook providers has led to a challenging user experience where, depending on where you get the books from, you have a different user experience, you have a different interface. As a result, sometimes you have to log in separately for each of these vendors, or you have to come up with ways to kind of map those logins, and it's less than perfect. Because these are multiple platforms, accessibility is not assured, and accessibility is a big concern for us as we focus on meeting accessibility guidelines at our university. Some vendors assume that our users and our students and our faculty are their customers, and as a result, sometimes compromise patron privacy. When it comes to the vendors, they sometimes brand things their way, and they're not library branded. And some vendors have chosen to use third-party systems like Adobe to act as an intermediary, where we don't actually have contracts with Adobe, and we lead frustrations because those products are not very good, but we've had no choice in using them. Some vendors and some publishers have actually introduced friction into the transaction as a way to kind of discourage the use of ebooks, as if to say, well, you're paying money for them, but we really don't want you to use them very much. And some libraries are forced to choose a single vendor, which has led to vendor lock-in and some lack of innovation and improvements. So SimplyE, why SimplyE? Well, public libraries led the way here. Again, New York Public Library received the original grants from the IMLS to build out SimplyE. And the goal was to make access to digital content simpler by creating a commercial grade open ebook reader that can bring together content from all these platforms and present it in a way that is 3 clicks or less. Find it, download it, read it. And that has been exemplified by the Readers First initiative. There are now over 300 libraries around the world dedicated to ensuring access to free and easy to use ebook content. And again, that same idea, search, download, read, 3 clicks or less. Put readers first. Across the country, we've seen adoption of this approach and the SimplyE system. There are now over 340 libraries that are public libraries using it. And as of this spring, 3 academic libraries, Columbia and NYU, and a library in Texas, an academic institution in Texas, has gone into production as well. So we're seeing adoption for an alternative to this vendor-based approach to the open ebook ecosystem. And what we've also seen is millions of dollars being spent by IMLS, our federal tax dollars at work, foundations like Sloan and Mellon, and institutions putting money and energy into transitioning to an open ebook ecosystem. And we can see some of those efforts that range from New York Public Library to LYRASIS to NYU, the work at DPLA with the Sloan grants, Amigos in the Southwest, Minitex, University of Minnesota, Michigan with Fulcrum, even the W3C and the work on the EPUB and web annotation standard, and of course the Redium Foundation in Europe. So at Columbia, our goal is to transform the academic ebook reading experience. We're adopting these open ebook technologies, and we're leveraging the library development from the public libraries to improve our experience for our students and our faculty. We've partnered with LYRASIS for development and hosting services. We've branded this as Columbia University Libraries, and a little plug for my article on the library is the brand and why that's so important for us on the bottom right. And we have a 3-year plan to deploy SimplyE in 3 phases. In this first year, to launch with up to 50,000 users and up to 50,000 ebooks and up to 500 users. In the upcoming academic year, to expand what we're calling the Great Ebook Expansion, to have at least 250,000 ebooks and up to 5,000 users, followed up by the following year with 1 million ebooks and up to 50,000 users, and then we'll go from there. So we've been in production with SimplyE for Columbia since February of 2021, just this past February. Thanks to the work with LYRASIS and a partnership to improve login with also University of Minnesota contributing, we now have campus login using the standard Shibboleth SAML in Common Federation authentication method, which James will talk about a little later. So LYRASIS is hosting it for us, so we're not doing any local development, nothing that's Columbia specific. It's all standard running in the LYRASIS environment so that any library could use what we're using. We're connecting to our local discovery. We use Blacklight-based discovery for our Clio interface, which I'll show you shortly. We have about 23,000 ebooks that comprise licensed ebooks, as well as open access ebooks, and some books from our digital collection that we've digitized. And we're focusing right now on non-DRM, PDF, and EPUB. New York University rolled it out at the same time. They actually focused on ProQuest ebooks and DRM books, and so they had a slightly different approach than we did. But the system will support non-DRM and DRM. And we actually conducted a faculty and student survey, and I can tell you the early data we got back. We had over 400 respondents to our survey among undergraduates and graduate students, a few faculty, but mostly students. 80% of the respondents preferred the convenience of having ebooks in one convenient app. And that was a huge plug for what we were doing. And 82% considered SimplyE to be good or excellent. So that's just an early bit of feedback that we were so pleased to have when we did an early user assessment in March, right after we rolled it out. And of course, you can learn more about SimplyE at that link below, library.columbia.edu/SimplyE. So with your, if you don't mind, I'd like to give you a live demo. And if you give me a moment to transition, I'm going to set us up with a live demo. So let me stop sharing here, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start with our catalog. This is called Clio, it's our catalog. And I'm going to search for a book. I happen to have a particular title. I'm looking for Green Alternatives and National Energy Strategy. So I'll search for that in our catalog, and I happen to find one of the books. And if you look here on the left, you can see the descriptive information, the bib record information. On the right, you'll see where it's located. And right over here, you'll see it says mobile. And I'm going to click on Read on SimplyE. At this point, it takes me over to an item level record, and I've happened to sign in already. So it says sign out. I've signed in with my campus login already, and I'm going to borrow this book. So now it's ready to read in SimplyE. So now at this point, let's go over to my mobile app. I'll go over to my phone. Okay, so here I am on my phone. I'm live. So here we go. We jump off, no parachute when we go do live demos. So I am launching SimplyE, and I can see that I have a Columbia University Libraries branded catalog of ebooks in this app. Now I can log in. I've already logged in, so I'll save a little time here. But I can see that I have Columbia University Libraries. If I touch the top left building, I see that I have other libraries I can connect to. So while I'm connected right now to Columbia University Libraries, I could also, because I'm in New York State and I can get a library card with the Public Library of New York, here I go to the New York Public Library and I can see books from the New York Public Library. If I touch the second icon on the lower left called My Books, I can see that I have a few books here. This is my Run Less, Run Faster book I'm trying to run. And I happen to have an audiobook here called Hidden Figures, and I could certainly listen to that in the car or when I'm walking, or I can listen to audiobooks or read these books. I could just as easily switch over to the Brooklyn Public Library, and I can see the catalog of books in Brooklyn. And I have a couple of books here about growing food at home, a gardening book, and vegan pizza. Sounds like a good idea as I start to grow some tomatoes and some squash and some vegetables outside. So what we see here is many libraries, one app. That's the first thing that we see is consolidation across multiple library systems. There are many other things you might connect to. You can connect to the Open Textbook Library. You can connect to the Internet Archive. You can connect to other open access books. I'm connecting to the Columbia Libraries, the New York Public Library, and the Brooklyn Public Library, something that some of our students might do. Now let me jump back over to Columbia University Libraries, and now, oh, there it is. As I clicked over to it, I see that the Green Alternatives and National Energy Strategy book that I just selected is available. Now I can touch that, and I will download the book, and here comes the book. Now I've downloaded this book, and I can go ahead and read it, but I can also look at the description. You see this book comes from Johns Hopkins University Press, one of our partners that has provided the books to us that we license. I can also look at the description, and I can see at the bottom of this that I can also jump right back to the catalog. So I can click the catalog record and go back to Clio to read more about the book if I like, and just as simply touch the top left and jump back over to SimplyE. So the idea is I could go from SimplyE to Clio and Clio back to SimplyE. We think this is terrific. So now at this point, I might want to read this book. So I can click on read. And I happen to be looking at this earlier. I'm going to jump back to chapter 4. I'll move back to where I was. It synchronizes where you left off, and I can start reading this book. I can start to turn pages. I can read my book. And this should be no surprise. It's like anything else. I can see the graphics. If I like, I can resize. I can make the text a little bit bigger. I can make the text smaller. And of course, I could go and jump to a different chapter, such as chapter 3 on green vehicles. So pretty straightforward. EPUB, book, reading, licensed book, works really well. I'll jump back. Now, while I'm here, I notice that I have a few other books. Here's an open access book called ProGit. This book was published by Springer Nature and released publicly. So at this point, I can read a book about Git. And this is available, and I can start looking at this, and this is pretty nice. And I can zoom in and zoom out with pinch and zoom. So if I want to look at this on my phone, I can certainly get in there more. Or I could look at it on my tablet. I could also look at, so there's a licensed book with the Green Alternatives book, the open access book with the ProGit book, but I could also look at things we've digitized and made available to the world. We have these available in the Internet Archive. The Internet Archive provides us with a feed, and now they're available to our users in SimplyE. Homes in Hawaii is one example of that. So this was digitized by Columbia University Libraries. I could read this book, and I've got a nice, wonderful cover, and I could start look at this. You know, they digitized for us at the Internet Archive. There we go, digitized by the Internet Archive with funding from Columbia Libraries. And I could start to look at this book. And so here's just a digital collection. I can zoom in, I can zoom out. I can go on and look at this book right here. That happens to be a PDF. So I have many formats, one app, EPUB and PDF. So now let me just jump back over to our collections. And I can continue on there. So that's a brief demo of what SimplyE looks like for our users that we've launched this spring. Let me go over to my slides. And so I give you a little demo of that. I mentioned that you can connect from Clio, our catalog, right to SimplyE. We log in with campus authentication with my standard campus ID and password. It's dual factor authentication supported, so it works with Duo login. And it synchronizes your bookmarks, and it synchronizes the last page read. As I showed you, I was able to jump back to chapter 4. And I can maintain a personal bookshelf of the books that I've selected for reading. We think this is all terrific. So we've got one mobile app, multiple library systems, one mobile app with multiple formats, EPUB and PDF, one mobile app for licensed, open, and digital collections. And we can see them on multiple devices. Here we see PDF of that Homes in Hawaii book on my phone, on a Samsung tablet running Android, and on an iPad running Apple iOS. On the bottom right, we see the same phone, Samsung tablet, and iPad running that Green Alternatives book, which is an EPUB book. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other interfaces we're working at, including web and desktop a little bit later. Thanks to this open system, we also can get access to the data. LYRASIS has published a set of ways to extract the data, and we've created a simple Google Data Studio dashboard that tells me about some of the usage of these books and the patrons that are using them. You can see that spike at March 15th is when we sent out a mailing to 7,000 users for the promotion for our user assessment survey with some gift cards to the bookstore. And that gave us a big surge, which is, of course, we like that as well. So our next steps now, phase 2, is to expand our ebooks. We are in active conversations with Springer, ProQuest, and EBSCO. ProQuest has already implemented this with NYU, and they've agreed to partner with us to pilot this for the next year. So we're excited to work with them, and we're encouraging them to kind of support us here. Springer, we have a lot of Springer ebooks, and they're working through the process of sending us the data, and EBSCO as well. And right behind that, we have an evidence-based acquisition agreement with Taylor and Francis for the Rutledge collection, and we plan to bring Taylor and Francis in. And we have many, many more vendors that we'd like to bring in, both ebook providers and aggregators to work with. Beyond that, we want to support digital book lending using DRM. I do not believe DRM is bad. I believe bad DRM is bad. And I define bad DRM as proprietary DRM, or DRM that's in control of one entity that can be taken away to diminish the user experience. So we're choosing to work with an open ecosystem DRM called Redium LCP. And that, we think, is an open standard that will allow us to have different business models to meet the needs of our users and meet the needs of our budgets. And that will be our work we're doing with digital book lending coming up. And we're going to do more extensive faculty and student user assessment in the next academic year. And we will start to evaluate reading experience using additional mobile devices, applications, as well as web and desktop. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to James.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. My name is James English, and as Rob had mentioned, I originally came to library industry through the New York Public Library, where I was the product manager for the SimplyE app when we received our IMLS grant, which basically said, try to improve this reading experience at public libraries. Since then, I've come to LYRASIS, where I've been trying to take the very platform that we developed at New York Public Library and make it more available to different libraries across the country. The majority of libraries in the nation aren't, of the economic fortitude of NYPL, nor do they have quite the same organization or service arrangement that NYPL has. So a lot of the work I do here at LYRASIS is also to extend the application and make the service available to libraries that aren't a large urban library. Namely, that's consortia. 77% of libraries operate in some type of consortial arrangement, and then also extend it into other types of libraries, so that consortia that are multi-use type libraries or support multi-use type of members, such as an academic library or K through 12 or other type of library other than a public library, could also use this. So we've been primarily doing this by working with state libraries through COSLA, and introducing the platform, and then also working with great local partners like NYU and Columbia, who have helped really push the system and demonstrate it in the academic use case. So our goal at LYRASIS is kind of learn by doing. As we go into these new markets and into these new arrangements or types of libraries, you got to learn by doing. Not everyone's the same. They have different needs and requirements. And the last mile is, you know, sometimes a paved road and sometimes it's a very unpaved road. And by that, it's kind of an analogy to sometimes there's existing standards that we can leverage to do this last mile integration. Sometimes we have to create new interfaces into the platform to be able to connect in. And so our goal is to implement and host the technology for libraries and extend and enhance the platform, whether that means needed authentication support or needed development to extend the content interfaces that exist today. And then support and maintain that implementation and help gather feedback on the platform from libraries and library leaders and users, and bring that back into the roadmap for the platform. Next slide, please. So working with ebook providers, we're trying to expand access to licensed materials. So as Rob mentioned, on the academic ebook provider side, we're trying to expand into EBSCO, ProQuest. We've been able to do that with NYU, and we'll be doing that with Columbia. They've implemented an interface that we can simply just now point the server to, and all that content can come in. We're also in discussions with Springer and with the leadership of Rob, talking to folks like Taylor and Francis, Elsevier, Gale, and Cengage. We're also working direct, again, with Rob's help and leadership, working with the university presses such as Johns Hopkins, Columbia, MIT, NYU, University of Michigan as well. And then public library ebook providers, we've already implemented. So for those of you that aren't necessarily an academic library, we support all the main ebook providers for public library: Overdrive, 3M, Biblioteca, BiblioBoard. Those, whether you're using Overdrive, Overdrive Advantage, or Overdrive Advantage Plus, the platform supports that integration, and that for both the ebook and audiobook, and the different license types that these different providers provide in terms of access to the published content and licensed content that a library may be using from them. We're also working hand in hand with the DPLA Exchange, who's recently launched a marketplace that can access all the same trade EPUBs and publications that you would expect from an Overdrive, Biblioteca, BiblioBoard, or 3M, but they can make some of those publishers that aren't as widely available now for the first time to public libraries. So the big news you may have seen recently was Amazon Publishing now has an exclusive arrangement with DPLA to make their content, those 10,000 works, never available before to a public library, now available through the DPLA. So you don't have to be an Amazon Prime user. You don't have to pay money to go read popular authors like Dean Koontz. You can now do that through your public library that is working with the DPLA Exchange and using SimplyE. And then for those of you that saw the RB Digital Media's acquisition by a large ebook provider, Overdrive, that material was no longer available on the other platforms. That will also be available through the DPLA Exchange, the RB Digital Media Group, who publishes both those ebooks and audiobooks exclusively. Next slide, please. We're also trying to expand access to open access and public domain materials with the platform. So there's platform integrations to date that we have for open access materials with platforms like Fulcrum that provides academic ebook materials from their several university presses, as well as open access materials that would be topical in nature or of interest to a public library. We're making that available to public libraries as well. The Open Research Library, which is an aggregation of mostly open access materials from Europe, we're making available, as well as content from the Open Textbook Library you can put in there right now that's been assembled by the University of Minnesota at Minitex. And then the public domain corpuses like Unglued and Standard eBooks, those are all available. And then our partner, the Digital Public Library, has done aggregation of a lot of this material already through what its program called the Open Bookshelf, in which they've had libraries curate the best of the best from these sources, but you can also pick and choose what you may want to get from that one aggregated collection. Where we're going to continue the integration path. To date, our eyes are set on folks like Muse and OAPN and their digital open access catalog and aggregate, and again with the DPLA, if you're a smaller university press or a university press that wants to extend into public libraries or make content available also through SimplyE, they're looking to build aggregation arrangements with them as well. Next slide, please. So how does it all work? Well, it's magic, but no, it's just technology. You know, it's hard work. The lead architect for of the platform, Leonard Richardson at NYPL, said, you know, this isn't rocket science, it's just tedious. And so that's what he took on, was to do all the tedious work of API integration, building standards, contributing to standards, writing code, and doing this hard work. And so the middleware piece of this is really where the magic happens. And it is where you assemble and you can configure it to go and touch all of these different APIs. You just drop the provider down in a little drop down, you put the URL in. If you have an account key, you just put that into the form and you can connect up to that ebook service. And so this allows us to aggregate content from multiple sources, wherever they may be on the cloud or on the web. You can also, you know, and that has many benefits. So whether your collection is at the state or at your consortia, or it's a locally provided account, you can aggregate all that content as a public library into your library. If you're a university, you have multiple content providers anyway by necessity, and you can aggregate that all into a single user experience. And that content can come from locally hosted collections, metadata from a discovery system, ebooks providers, whether they're a large aggregator like EBSCO or ProQuest, or open collections like Open Research Library, Fulcrum, etc., or the Internet Archive. And then there's that little box on the bottom is this is where authentication and access happens. For a public library, it happens in your ILS. That is where the identity management and authorization is granted. For campus-based authentication systems that a university would run, that typically happens in Shibboleth or CAS. And so we can support both of those authentication access methods. We then normalize all of that aggregated data, and we can provide that back out to different discovery systems, a web catalog, and a mobile app that accompanies the program. Next slide. So as you saw, I kind of talked through this. Next slide. Next slide. So all of these, DRM, non-DRM, SAML-based or ILS-based authentication, all the different components are there. You just use which ones you need through a simple admin interface configuration that we'll do for you at LYRASIS anyway, just to make sure everything tests out and there's no network issues. Next slide. So here's some just examples of how the platform is being used today. So one of our first state libraries to roll this out was Connecticut State Library. They call it their EGO program. And here's how they use the platform. They use it to connect local ebook services that a library may have. They connect that consortial ebook services. They have 3 large main consortia across the state that many members take part in. And then they have ebooks services that they provide at the state level that they also make available. And then there are national collections that are being provided, like from the DPL Exchange with the open bookshelf, that they aggregate into there. So as you come down to you travel over to the right of the app as a user, when I log into my local library in the mobile app, I'm getting the largest inventory available to me for books that I can find, read, and discover. And it has many benefits that aren't necessarily intuitive right off the bat. But what we found is that what this does is when you have more inventory, you have more availability. That means you rarely, if ever, find a holds queue in a public library. And that's really unheard of. Even if you have a large collection as a big urban library and you're using your commercial ebook app, you generally have to find you generally run into a holds queue. With SimplyE, what we're doing is, because we're bringing so much inventory into play, there's rarely, if ever, a holds queue. The other thing we knew is that most users, when they come to a public library setting, they don't have a particular title in mind. So they're just looking for the large, that collection, because it's by its existence, a recommendation from a librarian that they trust. And they do that 3 to 2, prefer to find something to read, not a particular title. And that what that does is, in the way we present the books, is it creates an immediate access opportunity for them. In many ways, if you compare like to this service to a pay per use type of service like Hoopla, we have the same user experience. In Hoopla, there is no holds queues. It's just pay as you go. And SimplyE, there's just no holds queues generally, although it'll support holds queues if there's a particular popular title and not enough copies. But in general, the user experience is no holds queues. And what that means is they can have the same experience, but the economic benefit of traditional licensing. Next slide. Here's another state library. This is the State Library of Montana, and they've been using this in a little bit different way. They're connecting to their Overdrive collection, where they have a bunch of professional materials that they make available not only to the state government staff, but also to the population at large. They've also have an arrangement with DPLA, so they can grow that into more pleasure reading or other type of materials and acquisition of materials to that. There's no membership cost to the DPLA exchange. It's free. You just buy books there. That's the only cost to you. And then there's the Internet Archive, where they've digitized, like Columbia, a lot of works that, like government documents, that they're trying to make available. And so they aggregate that into that collection. Next slide. What that kind of looks like: 2 different state collections. One is where you see on the left is a Montana State Library, where they have their government documents and their professional development collection through their web catalog. But now they, on the right, you see Ego, where it's really that local library brand that's up front in the app, but it's bringing to bear national, state, consortia, and local collections all in one interface for their users. So it's, as a small public library, you now have a collection larger than most urban libraries. Next slide. Connecting content and metadata with Columbia. So now we flip over to the use of the platform in the context of an academic university. For Columbia, they had locally hosted collections that they have their own university press, so we can locally host those and publish those out through SimplyE and make those available. There is metadata from their discovery system that they want to incorporate, so that ability of Rob to go back and forth from his catalog, Clio, is made available through this ability to exchange metadata. And then there's the digitized collections. There's also other API-based collections that we can connect in, whether those come from open repositories like Fulcrum and ORL, but also Internet Archive, which is using OPS as well, which is a protocol we use that is open. And then soon it will be ebook providers like ProQuest, EBSCO, Gale, Springer, Nature, etc. And again, we all go through their campus-based security. Next. Columbia University, they've already done some aggregation at a contractual level with ProQuest. And so all we had to do is really just work with that vendor to have them create one of these standard interfaces that we provide. And so there was a little trail breaking there, is kind of what I noted. And this is where we had to write code to support the way that they implemented that. But once we did that, there was 150,000 books that just came into the NYU collection. Now they have the rest of the system to explore, to bring in the rest of the content vendors that they couldn't get necessarily through EBSCO, or I'm sorry, through ProQuest. They can now bring that into their content and strategy for SimplyE. And again, other aspects of the tool is the use of the tool to present the collection the way you want to present them in different ways. So with Rob, he started out at Columbia with their digital highlights. These are these really rare materials that they've digitized and they can now make available alongside their ebooks. On the New York University side, they had a lot of aggregation there of their course books and their reference materials. So they used the tool more as a guide into those specific aspects of their collection to guide users into it. So 2 different approaches. You as the library get to control it. You as the library is the brand that your patrons and your staff or faculty or students see when implementing SimplyE. It's no longer a vendor-based arrangement or view of the collection. For public, that's typically they're trying to push people at the bestsellers long holds queues. For academic libraries, they're using it to highlight their special collections or to facilitate the student learning through their course works and reference materials. For public libraries, you'll notice on NYPL, they use it to really get those gems that they find that they promote for their community in the tool. You have all that control with the platform. Next slide. So what we learned, next steps. Well, standards are your friend. Use them, adopt them, and document their implementation at your organization. We need better tools than MARC, quite frankly, for aiding in discovery. While we can support MARC output, there are other metadata standards out there that we need to focus on. Persistent IDs are not widely used across the industry, whether that be in trade or on the academic side. Academics are much better on the journal side, in which they have document IDs across the board, but on the monograph side and the trade side, it's not as consistent a use, and this creates is the source of a lot of the metadata issues we find in discovery challenges. And then we need alternatives for classifications for discovery when we're talking about academic libraries. So SimplyE was primarily built for public libraries, so it has an ontology, a taxonomy that is really designed for discovery and pleasure reading, whereas academics, it's more of a different need around the subject headings. Next steps are to monitor and measure what we've implemented, collect and analyze and use user feedback, and then work with libraries to explore other capabilities, such as the use of LCP, which the platform can support, for things like digital lending. And then again, new provider integrations and the utilization of the DPLA exchange and the open research and open access integrations that exist. Next slide. So kind of the future, whether it's EPUB, PDF, or audiobooks, or maybe in the future, who knows what it will be. We see the platform is really simple. It's an integration layer of all the different content, wherever that may be. And then we're trying to extend that into different browsers, solutions, reading desktop solutions, and of course the mobile. So right now we do have a mobile app, SimplyE. We have a web catalog, but we are working with the Reading Foundations developing a web-based e-reader. And then, of course, the EDRL has put out a Thorium desktop reader, which is a desktop reader that is accessible with assistive technologies for both people with visual impairments and people who don't have visual impairments. It also supports LCP and is cross-platform. It can run on Mac, Linux, Windows, and there are no support issues with that. Next slide. Where to explore and advance the open ecosystems. Again, I mentioned some of these things around like use of doc IDs and ORCID ID. These are standards that are used to help identify the authors of the content, as well as the canonical ID of that content, so it's persistent. And then digital repositories. Many state libraries have these repositories, and academic libraries as well, where they have their digital items and collections, things they authored or read, and there's open interfaces that we're going to explore interfacing into. So you have your own content management system can now come into this distribution platform. And then in the future, maybe journals and articles. For the public, state, and special use libraries, DPLA Exchange has been really pushing the frontier on new licensing models of concurrent use that are much more favorable to a public library. So 10 users at the same time can read the same book, and you can buy those in packs instead of limited one user at a time. Persistent ownership type models. So all of those and owning those different licenses for the same work at the same time can really help collection developers on the public side. And then diversity in publishers, finding those publishers not represented in the big trades. And then content integrations, again, with some of these more academic facing or state library facing content aggregators and providers. And then one day, is my dream is to have Benetech or the National Library Services come through, because we are an accessible app. So you don't have to have, different reading apps for families where one person may have a visual impairment or reading impairment and the other family uses a different app. You can now have the family sharing the same app or understanding the same UI and interface, but just having different visual needs in that, and we can support that. And then, again, with the apps, always want to kind of make them delightful and more useful, like user customization and preferences, and then user feedback about content to inform libraries and academics. And that's it for my part of the presentation. I hope I didn't take too long, and I hope we do have time for questions, because I love talking with people and learning more about what you are looking for from a platform like this.
Thanks, James. Yeah, we're here at this point to answer any questions that you may have. And I think I was seeing a lot of items in the chat. So maybe we'll just go up to the chat and just work through the chat questions first and see what comes up. So Mike, yes, bad DRM is bad. Thank you. Yep. Vermont has many unpaved roads. Okay. There we go. We're trail breaking. Joshua or Kevin, might VTlib or VLA GMLC be able to work on this? So Joshua or Kevin?
I'll jump in and say that conversation sort of continued on, and I think Josh and I both thought that the suggestion made a lot of sense to at least get a working group together to talk about it. So apologies for hijacking the presentation, which was amazing, to do some internal organizing.
Yeah,
but I think you've sold us on it. We just need to figure out how to be a part of it ourselves. So yeah, and I think Mike posted a link to a forum for people who are in this group who might consider joining a working group to talk about how to bring things like this to Vermont. Thanks so much.
Thank you. We're here to support you. I mean, we're in this together. We can't transform this ecosystem without the support of hundreds of libraries. And our goal is to really have hundreds of academic libraries to go alongside those hundreds of public libraries. And across all these libraries, help to move the system forward, build a better experience for our readers. Let's see, any other questions that we have here? Okay, so I think that was the chat. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? I don't know how this community works. If you'd like to just unmute and ask questions, that's perfectly fine, or raise your hands, whatever works for this group. I think maybe just unmute and start chatting and see how it goes.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask a question. My sense is that if a library joins this, that you then can ditch all of the plugins and apps and such that all of the vendors provide, and just say, like, just so you basically, it's a way to unify the experience, which currently right now is pretty multi-directional, where you have to, if you want to read something from one vendor, you have to use one reader and so forth. So can you speak to some of that experience for the places that have done this, about what it was like to get rid of the...
Yeah, I'll mention a little bit what Columbia did, and maybe James, you could talk about some of the publics. I started this conversation to ditch some of these proprietary products about 3 years ago, starting with Safari and ProQuest as the exclusive distributor of Safari technical books, who was coming out with a new version of their platform with a new app and a new login method, new capturing user data. And we basically said, no, we're not going to use your product. We're not going to adopt your proprietary application, your mobile app. We're not going to compromise our user data. We had to do some mitigation over a period of 6 months to acquire books in a different way, but we turned it off, and we're not looking back. 2 years ago, we got every librarian, after having a frustrating spring dealing with Adobe Digital Editions and many customer support issues with downloading and setting up user IDs, we got the librarians to unanimously agree to drop any vendor's Adobe Digital Editions product, and we turned off Adobe Digital Editions for our platforms, ProQuest and EBSCO. And we're now working, now there's a lag there because we lost some download capabilities in the short term. That's why we're working with those same vendors for SimplyE. So yeah, we've started that process of what I call stopping mobile app, proprietary mobile app proliferation. You have to say that 3 times fast. Proprietary mobile app proliferation. Stop, just stop. That's the key. And the only way to stop, the only way to get out of the hole of the situation we're in is to stop digging and to stop accepting every time a vendor comes in and says, hey, we hired a new content design person. We're coming out with a new web platform with a new app and it's going to be great. You cannot separate out the collection from the application. You can't separate out the content from the software. At the time of contract, at the time of those upgrades, is the time to reject proprietary mobile apps and these proprietary plugins. Otherwise, it'll never end. And you might have to, it might take a while to extricate it. You might have to do it one vendor at a time, but that's what we're doing. James?
Yeah, on the public side, we face a lot of the same challenges. So probably for those of you who work in a public library, you have the horror stories of trying to get a patron to a piece of content. They went to your catalog, they borrowed it, they had an app, they looked for it in the app, it wasn't there. They had the wrong app if you're using different, multiple vendors. If it is one vendor, you're probably happy. You have a unified experience using that one vendor, but you're then kind of challenged on the content and how do you manage your collection spend. A lot of the times those vendors are pushing all of your demand at one subset of your titles, namely bestsellers. What we saw at New York Public Library when we launched this is that 50% of our demand was in 1% of our titles because of that activity. Once we launched SimplyE, that went up to 3%, then next month 6%, then 9%. So people were getting deeper into our catalog, our circulation went up by 20%, and we didn't buy 1 ounce more of content. We just made it easier for people to discover the content we had, and we didn't make it confusing for where they had to go to get the content that they borrowed. So we saw a lot of positive benefits. Our tech support training calls went down because this was just an easy app to train. They didn't have to train a user who wanted ebooks to learn 3 or 4 different apps. They just showed them one app and they didn't even have to train. They just handed it to them because it's a very low hurdle for digital literacy, if that's an importance to you, to train people on. It's very simple language. You find a book, tap on it, hit get, hit read, and you're reading the book. There's none of this traveling a user through all these multiple wizards and screens to try to get a password or content or choosing media types. The app intelligently understands the media type and intelligently knows where the content is. It handles all the DRM on the background. All you need is a library card and you can get the books. So it's, we really designed it for accessibility, whether that meant low digital literacy, visual impairment, just low cost to support within your library. You don't, it's very expensive. It's a hidden cost of a lot of these commercial libraries, commercial platforms that libraries take on internally to be the training, to be the provider of all support for these things. And when you have multiple of them, you're just, compounding that cost. So
I had one faculty member wanted to download one book and had a problem. And he called me. 8 days of work to get one faculty member to download one book. Me, a librarian, electronic resources expert, library technology person, and the vendor. I won't even name what database vendor it was on, ProQuest. But it was 8 days because they outsourced their business to Adobe, and Adobe Digital Editions did a very poor job, and we had no contract with them. It was a horrific user experience. You can't quantify that as a cost. It's not on anybody's contract. It's not on your bill. But in terms of user experience and customer satisfaction, it was an F. We've dispensed with that. We've gotten rid of that. We're moving forward with it. And you just can't go backwards. You can't expose those experiences. And I saw that firsthand. Luckily, he was a very patient faculty member, but still 8 days for one person is not a good customer service experience.
The other thing that we also saw, just to throw it in there, is that a lot of libraries, they're buying public domain materials. And we kind of, when we built this project, it's like, why is that? Why am I in a holds queue for Moby Dick? It's a hard enough read, but to make me wait to have that read is a little challenging. And the reason was, well, that copy of it from the vendor was, it had a new cover and you got to pay for that cover and whoever wrote the forward on it. And now it's a copy. We have the best of the best from that have been commercial grade EPUBs of public domain that have public domain access rights, simultaneous, unlimited use. Many people, as long as they want to use it, for free coming out of SimplyE. Over 10,365 works and growing up to 25,000, I think is the goal that a library gets for free. They can stop taking their collection dollars to buy what they already own as a public, because in the public domain, you own it, and we all own it. It's our collective cultural heritage. It doesn't need to be repackaged and sold to us. You can get that for free at no additional cost. For some public libraries, that may be the only collection they have because they have 0 ebooks today. It may double their ebook collection that they have today at 10,000 works. It's a substantial investment that the DPLA is making, and it's being curated by librarians. And some of the books that they've found in this are just beautiful editions of it. I mean, down to we call them the bespoke, the artisanal ebook publications. Instead of the ellipsis for quotes, it's both quotes, not two things pointing that way. I mean, they take great care researching the background and the history, the images, beautiful works. A group called, and it's actually an individual out of called Chicago Standard Ebooks who does this. And then Eric Hellman out of, I think, New York, who has the Unglue It open source collection. Just had to put a plug in them. They do beautiful work and they're making that available to you as public libraries, which is awesome at no cost.
Any other questions that you have?
I guess I'm wondering just about if one saw this and said like, gee, I want one. Are you mostly working with consortia at this point rather than individual libraries? Or I'm just curious if people in the audience were to say like, I'd love to get involved. What are things that they or we can do?
You can go to lyrasis.org and we have it listed, we can work with anyone, small public library, consortia, or a state library, special use library, or academic library. We're happy to work with you. What we've done is try to package this open source software and this platform as a turnkey service. You don't do anything. We take care of building the servers, deploying the software, managing and testing the integrations. We give you a ticket management system that if you have any issues, it's just like what you would do if like you were with Overdrive, you can just send in a ticket. What else? We have training materials. We have promotional materials. We have a community of practice hubs so librarians can talk to one another about how they use SimplyE to reimagine their collections. So it's a lot of stuff that we've wrapped around. And the affordability actually shocks a lot of people when they see the price. So I was looking at, I think, Green Mountain Consortium, the collection there, the size of that collection, that's our smallest tier. We can handle up a lot bigger collections for that. And you're paying at our smallest, lowest tier for the server. And that's, those costs are just cost recovery from Amazon for hosting a server for a year.
And we're working together, for a reason. I believe that as much as possible, the public libraries, the academic libraries have much more in common than they don't have in common. So by working together, we think we can leverage each other's strengths and bring together, common needs and common purposes. So academic libraries, we're challenged because we have, hundreds and hundreds of ebook providers. But public libraries are working at scale at a state level. And so together we're finding that we have complementary needs and complementary values that I think are going to help us move this thing forward. And so our goal is to work with consortia across the country, individual public or academic institutions, make this as easy as to install. If you want to install it locally, you can install it locally. If you want to work with an entity like LYRASIS or one of the other consortia providers around the country, you can do so. It's open stack, it's open code, it's open ecosystem, and it's all with the intent of improving reading for our users.
And we're fun to work with.
Oh yeah, of
So
course.
that's, or we think so. Hopefully that's what other people think.
We're legends in our own mind.
Yes.
Well,
So are there other questions out there? I want to be sensitive. We're sort of running out of time. Are there any last questions that folks have? Well, I want to I'm not hearing any. Thank you both so much. This is always exciting. Like I said, I've been tracking this for years now, and it's so fabulous to see all the progress that you've made. And we now have a list. This is great. We're like organizing during the conference. So we've got a list and we'll figure out. And James, are you the right person to reach out to if we want to
Yeah,
talk
you can
more?
reach out to me, or you can just go up onto LYRASIS website. My name is James English, james.english@lyrasis.org, and I'd be happy to set up a time, a web conference to talk with you. Reach out to your fellow librarians at your consortia. They may be looking at it. Your state librarian may be looking at it, but again, just feel free to reach out anytime.
Super. Thank you. Thank you again so much. This has been fabulous.
All right. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. And if you have questions, just let us know. We're happy to follow up with you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great conference.